Railroad engineers, have you ever come across anything creepy or weird on the tracks while driving your train? I worked on the signaling for the light rail system in Pittsburgh, USA. We would do all of our testing late at night after revenue hours. Lots of wildlife around the tracks. As we were moving along at about 50 miles per hour, a white-tailed deer jumps out onto the tracks and we clobber the poor thing. The engineer doesn't hesitate. Gets on the radio and tells Central Control to call Hannibal Lecter. And gives the milepost. I look at him sideways but he doesn't explain. We continue our run into the city. Turn around. And head back out the same way. As we come up on the site where we hit the deer, there is a guy in full camouflage on the side of the railroad butchering the carcass. With a big pile of steaming deer guts next to the track. Did I mention it was about 15 degrees Fahrenheit and snowing? Engineer gives a toot on the horn and we continue with our run. I work in Houston as an engineer. And we usually putt around town between 10 and 20 miles per hour. Slow enough for a naked crackhead to jump out of a bush by a city park and start pleasuring herself in front of the engine. I guess she really likes trains. Edit. I also had a kid play chicken with my train when I was going about 50 miles per hour. But that was more scary than weird. I haven't hit anybody yet. But everybody says it's only a matter of time. Freight train conductor here. Wanna know what's creepy or weird? When people try to get across the tracks last second or play chicken with my 30 million pound train. You are not playing chicken with an inanimate object, you're playing with me and my engineer. When you lose. And it happened far too often. I get to see your exploded carcass flipping at 150 RPMs off the track and deal with the overwhelming feeling of guilt. Please don't try to beat a train. Edit. A few words. One time I went skinny dipping with some friends, then we all stood next to the track naked as a train went by. Hopefully it brightened the engineer's day. Depends on what gender you are, I'm sure. A large part of my family works for the railroad and here is what I've heard. Not all creepy but scary. 1. My dad, who is a no-nonsense 6'6" man, came home one night after a derailment and was white as a sheet. He told my mom he met a man walking away from the derailment, which was in the middle of the woods. He didn't think it was too weird because some people check out wrecks and derailments. Anyway, my dad gets to the derailment and says hey to my uncle. The cause of the derailment was a truck that had been hit and then pushed by the engine. Now, none of this is weird until my dad sees the man in the truck. It looked like a beat up version of the man he met on the way to the derailment. He got the man's driver's license when the sheriff's deputy showed up. The way my uncle put it was your dad almost passed out and had to sit down. He didn't say why because you don't do that around railroad men. 2. My uncle was walking the rails, which you do to prevent derailments and such, and he had to pee. So he went into some woods. He said he walked up onto what he was sure was some kind of animal sacrifice weird sheet. He called the other workers to see it and they were very creeped out. They just left and tried to make a joke of it. 3. The number of drunk hobos, homeless people who pass out on the rails is oddly high. 4. Also, a hobo was found dead in a hopper car, the kind that are open and typically hold grain. They figured since it was the summer he wanted more air circulation and hopped in that one. Well, the car was filled and no one really looks in it. It wasn't figured out until the car was unloaded. Locomotive engineer from the Northeast, us here with 15 years service. Aside from the dead animals, I think finding a body that was hit by a previous train might have been the creepiest. I've hit a few cars and people before but I never had to go back and look. That's the conductor's job. The person we found wasn't really identifiable as a human being. Just a pile of meat. What gave it away were the scraps of clothing mixed into the pile. As far as weird things, there are a few people out there that are really in love with trains. You can use your imagination as to what these grown men do in the middle of nowhere at 2 AM. Went by a few movie shoots. Biggest one was the first Transformers movie. The scene where Bumblebee gets caught. A lot of movies are shot in that area by the 1st Street Bridge in LA. Pretty sure there is a porn studio not far from there too. There is a nudist colony on one run where an old guy would always come out and wave at the trains. Knew we were coming since there were road crossings that we had to whistle for. Got mooned by some guys on a golf course. Not pretty. I'm a conductor, so I'm the guy that sits directly to the left of the engineer. I haven't been doing it for too long yet, so I probably haven't seen the amount of stuff a qualified engineer has. My first week as a trainee on the job, we came across a dead pony next to the tracks that must have been hit only a few hours earlier. The next morning, going back the other way, we passed by it again and it looked like what you would expect to see on a Discovery Channel show. Scavengers had gotten to it that night and it was maybe half a pony at this point. Nature is pretty rad. There is a routine here in Tokyo to deal with people on the rails. The government even charges a fee to the family of suicidal guys, given they interrupted the traffic. I'm not a train engineer per se, but I've spent lots of years working on the signals of the East Coast. I'd say one of the most interesting things I've seen are the villages of people that really pop up in the right spots. Tons of people. Dogs. Homeless villages with friendly people who aren't afraid or embarrassed ever at all. Also, in some mountain towns of West Virginia, there are some unique folks with tracks running through their properties. Up in the coal mines of Wyoming, they have what rail crews call the Golden Arches. It's just a yellow painted framework that has speakers on it that the empty coal trains pass through. A warning is played on repeat saying in Spanish and English, "Danger. Get out. This car is about to be loaded." Loaded coal cars get dumped at power plant pits where huge augers break it up. I guess more than a few poor souls have been augered up accidentally after being covered up with coal. My dad was one for a while. He was working at a station one day and there was a woman crying on one of the benches. A few of the staff asked if she was okay or needed help, but she completely ignored them. Next thing they knew, she threw herself in front of one of the express trains. They were finding pieces of her as far as the next station along. Hey. I'm an engineer on a class 1 on the West Coast. 9+ years of seniority, with 7 being as an engineer. Have never seen anything creepy or mysterious though, but have hit plenty of unfortunate animals. And trespassing incidents are as sky high as ever. Also, train riders may be decent sometimes, but a lot of them are criminals and some are very dangerous. Every so often a story pops up where some suburban kid decides to ride the rails and ends up dead. It's not a safe environment for anyone. So, nothing ghostly or mysterious to report, but please make sure you stay well clear of the tracks. We do not like hitting people. We don't sign you out to watch people die, and a lot of co-workers have a degree of PTSD afterwards. My brother was a lifeguard and used to walk to work across several train tracks. One day, a train was stopped on one of the tracks and my brother saw a figure lying prostrate next to the train in a pool of blood. It turns out the guy had tried to crawl underneath the train while it was stopped, only to have the train start moving while he was underneath it. The guy must have been about 60 years old. The train had crushed one of his legs. Being a lifeguard, my brother made a tourniquet, called 911, etc. The man survived, but his leg had to be amputated. The paramedics said that he would have died within the hour from blood loss if my brother hadn't been there. My first time on a train, I was traveling in Germany with my grandfather, and he noticed and pointed out to me that we were riding on the wrong tracks. We were northbound on the southern track. Our curiosity got the better of us when I pointed out that there were some guys in bright yellow vests doing some kind of maintenance. And then we noticed that there was blood and meat all shredded up on the tracks. We were going really slow because of the workers, and we watched intently and tried to figure out what kind of animal it had been. But no hooves or fur were discernible. Then we went quite a distance without seeing many chunks, but the tracks were still bloody. Then there it was. A blue dress. Conductor here. One time in the middle of the night, in the middle of winter, 10 degrees and a foot of snow on the ground, my train went into emergency. I had to walk the length of the train to see what the problem was. The train was right in the middle of a very small town. As I'm walking by one of the houses on the outskirts of this town, I see a guy standing in the driveway about 50 feet from me wearing a trench coat and a sock hat type thing. The first thing that struck me as odd is that it was way too cold to be wearing just a trench coat. I shine my lantern on the guy, wave, and say hi. Nothing. The guy doesn't even move. I continue walking past the guy to the end of the train while looking back very often. I get to the end, turn around and head back. I get back to the house where this guy is standing and he is still there in the same place in the same position. I don't even say anything this time. I just speed walk back to the head of the train. The next day I'm taking a train back home during the day. I'm paying special attention to this house as we go by it. There is nothing there. The drive isn't shuffled. Nothing is there that could have been mistaken for a guy in a trench coat. I have since been by this house dozens of times and I have never seen a car parked there. Or a light on or anything at all. TLDR, saw a scary guy in a trench coat standing in the driveway of an abandoned house at 3 in the morning in the middle of winter. Not a train engineer. But once as a kid, 13-14, I was forgotten at a skating rink lock-in. About 8 AM the owner said that she had to go, so I took off walking towards home. It was about 12 miles away. After about a mile, I knew I could get on the tracks and it would take me right in front of my house. I was walking when I heard a train was coming in the distance. I moved off about 30 feet. As it approached, to the side away from the tracks, I witnessed a dog walk up to the tracks and lay its head flat on one of the tracks. As the train was getting closer, I called for the dog. I was about 50 feet away. It did not respond. I am sure the conductor did not see it, but it severed the dog's head away from the body. I was totally freaked out. I cried for about an hour. Then I decided to bury the dog with the rocks beside the tracks. I still had about 3 hours before I would arrive home walking. I thought for a moment that this was a sign that I should do the same. As I walked, I came to the conclusion that I witnessed this so I would not ever take my own life, since it was very disturbing to those left to witness. I've told this story to others since, and one time a vet tech told me that the dog must have known it was sick. When I got home and the others woke up, I told them about what I had witnessed and they accused me of making it up since they forgot me. It stuck with me for a long time. Not a railroad engineer, but the last time I went on a train, it was from Seattle to California. On the second night, we suddenly stopped and were waiting for a while. Apparently there had been a naked woman running along the train track and laid down and let the train go over her. I looked out the window after we stopped and heard the news. Well, sure enough, she was outside, looking right at me. I was 10 and I was scared as duck. I'm not a train engineer, but one time in grade school we were on a school trip and a railroad ran parallel to the road our bus was on. Our school bus ended up going the same speed and direction as a train, and the conductors opened their window and yelled slurs at us. 4th grade was fun. Yeah, this is pretty unrelated to what OP is asking, but it's one of the most relevant things in this thread so far. Bit late to the party, but here we go. Probably the strangest, most messed up thing would be the time we hit a flock of sheep at line speed, 110 kph or about 70 miles per hour. No idea how they got there. Guess the fence fell over or the gate was left open, but the first I saw of them was what appeared to be long grass covering the tracks ahead. A second later we realize they are sheep, so start leaning on the whistle. A matter of seconds after that and we're on top of them. Can't forget the awful, continuous noise it made, nor can I unsee the bits of wool and guts on flicking up onto the windscreen. The smell itself was horrendous, especially once the heat of dead sheep started cooking itself on hot traction motors underneath. We pulled up at the next crossing loop to cross another train, so we got out and viewed the damage. I used to have photos, but that phone has since died. Frequent Amtrak rider here. I've seen more Texas red eyes and bare asses than some internet but porn fetishists. Also some pretty obvious meth labs. Homeless bridge dwellers don't wipe, and rich dude bros and wood girls along waterfronts have some very white cottage cheese asses. Oh, and homeless camps. It's like the ducking Great Depression, but the government won't admit it. This happened on the L train in Chicago. I got on the Orange Line train heading north from Halstead. The train car was empty except for a passed out hobo in the corner. The next stop, this weird looking old guy gets on. Locks eyes with me as soon as he enters and, despite having a completely empty car's worth of seats to choose from, sits down directly behind me. He never breaks eye contact as he does. And he had some of the most sunken blue eyes I had ever seen. He rides behind me for a few stops while other people file in and out. The whole time I can feel him burning a hole in the back of my head. I get off at transfer station. And I watch as the doors close behind me. Creepy old guy still sitting in his seat. Still gazing into my eyes as the train pulls away. I ran through the station to my next train. And after riding it for several stops, I get out and look around for my friend who said she would meet me at the platform. As the people dissipated from the station and I looked for my friend, I realized the same guy from the train I had been on earlier, the same one that I saw pull away with him still on it, was at the end of the platform and still staring intensely at me. I froze. Felt confusion slowly fade to horror and booked it out of there. Told my friend and she was like, okay.